right, welcome back to the Moynihan Report. I'm your host, Michael Moynihan. It is the day after Labor Day. Summer's over. I'm amazingly depressed. And as I did a little promo for this before, and I said, I'm depressed. Everything's horrible. But I'm happy about today because we have a great guest. Well, he's going to be you're going to be a great guest?
Promise.
Okay, he promises to be a great guest. You know him, I'm sure, from the Team Human podcast. I've been referring to Douglas as a bit of a guru. He's been around for a long time. He's written 1,000 books. He's a professor of media theory and digital economics at CUNY, right?
Yeah.
And the author of Program or Be Programmed, 11 Commands for the AI Future. This is a reissue of a book from 2010, right?
Yep.
And so this is the new edition. Go out and buy it. Douglas Rushkoff, thanks for being here, buddy.
Thanks for having me.
I want to say so much to talk about. You have such a crazy trajectory, right? And you've talked about this a lot. I mean, you started this real, not techno-utopian, but real optimistic view of the world. And you watch Douglas Rushkoff get less and less optimistic over time. You've told that story. But what I was thinking about this morning, I was like, what is the thing that Douglas got wrong about our sort of media future, our tech future? I mean, you've written so much about this. If you go back through those books, one of those things like, okay, I really whiffed on that one.
Well, I'm a little lucky in that I didn't make any predictions.
Yeah.
So I can't be like wrong that way. You know, in the first book that I wrote on sort of internet-y cyber stuff, I was writing about lots of the happy possibilities.
It's like 94?
That came out in 94. It was canceled actually in 92 because they thought the internet would be over by 93 when it was supposed to come out.
Yeah.
So I was correct that the internet was going to happen. And I saw it coming up along with, rave and the psychedelic revival and fantasy role-playing games and nonlinear storytelling and chaos math and new physics and all this stuff. And I thought there's a possibility for a profound social, even civilizational and economic shift. But even at the end of that book, I said, look, there's a window of opportunity here that, we can either go through, but it's going to close. And there are many different forces vying to contextualize this thing that's happening. When I wrote the book, Wired didn't exist. But then after it got canceled, before we went back to press, Wired came out.
And that was Louis Rossetto, came from the Netherlands, right?
He came from the Netherlands with a very, a kind of an extreme libertarian view of digital technologies, basically arguing that thanks to digital technology, we can increase the surface area on markets infinitely so the economy can grow exponentially, uninterrupted forever. And I thought, well, that might not be the funnest way to use the internet.
But it was, that punk rock thing you described, that did last for a while though, didn't it? Before, and I know I want to get into this with you, of when it becomes, in your view, sort of far more corporatized and far less interesting. But there is a long stretch there where all those possibilities of the internet, whether they be blogs or ways to distribute music, that was happening for a long time, and you could arguably say it still is.
Oh yeah, it's kind of always there.
Yeah.
The punk rock thing always goes hand in hand with the kind of authoritarian thing. The two possibilities always exist. Sort of flipping from good trip to bad trip. So yeah, it's still even there. For me it was really, and maybe if I had a problem, it was the idea of the internet that excited me more in some ways than the reality of it. So the idea of the internet meant that we might want to rethink all of these obsolete social and economic systems. So now, like with AI, even though I really kind of hate AI, just temperamentally, I just don't like it. But the questions that AI forces us to ask about, what about people having jobs? It's like, as a media theorist, where did jobs come from? Oh, jobs were invented in the late Middle Ages along with charter monopoly. I don't want a job. I want money. I want stuff. I don't want a job. Oh, it's going to kill education. Well, we already killed education by making it about answers rather than inquiry. So, of course, So I feel like AI, again, as a thought experiment, forces us to rethink all of this stuff. But as an actual experiment, it's not nearly as pretty.
Yeah, I think that the thing of yours that I saw that made me think, okay, this is someone who sees this as a very kind of dark past 15 years, 20 years when it comes to technology and media, was a speech that you gave a couple of months back at South by Southwest. As you present it, and you can do it better than I can, is that South by was that kind of punk rock festival that became something very corporate. And, you could make the same argument about Burning Man and other things. You went in really hard, and I noticed in that you actually lay all the blame at the feet of Wired. You keep coming back to how much you hate Wired.
That's the moment.
Yeah, at the moment. Yeah. Okay, so that's the moment. But is that not inevitable that you have something, and that is the case with neighborhoods? They're cool. People move in, then billionaires and millionaires end up moving in. Record labels that are small, and people get into them. It's just like anything else, though.
Yeah.
A festival that people think is cool and gets media coverage is going to become that inevitably, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I got in a conversation. It sounds like name dropping, and it is, I guess. Got in a conversation about this when he was alive with Jerry Garcia, who said, people always ask me about the 1960s, and I tell them the 1960s was about 2 weeks in the summer of 1968 when it was happening, and the rest of it was I Want to Teach the World to Sing, was the commercialization and So I think it feels inevitable, but if it's inevitable and it keeps happening in these bigger ways with more highly scaled technology, then kind of look out. This is the same thing. It's back to Adam Smith. Was saying we need some safeguards to protect the sort of small business, cottage industries, the little town, the local reality, because otherwise these larger players will inevitably come in and suck everything out of the system.
So what do you see that sort of system as now? I mean, obviously, so many big players that have really taken over. I mean, YouTube, which is a Google product. I mean, I use Google to search. I use Google to send my email. I use Google to watch videos, et cetera. And then there's other versions of that, of big companies too. Why should I be concerned about that? I mean, they give me so many amazing products for free.
Google does one. Google just got clobbered. I mean, and people think it's not clobbered because they didn't have to take their Chrome browser away or something. It's like, no, this is they've just been regulated more than I thought they would. It's just because when one company gets too big, they can attack from both sides. It's not just a monopoly, but a monopsony, where they can call the terms on their suppliers and call the terms on the customers, and it's kind of a dangerous amount of power. It's what Amazon is also sort of moving towards in its retail and web server operations. It's but it's not, to me, that's not even this sort of the great existential harm here.
What is the great existential issue?
Right now, I think it's the this is why I've kind of shifted into this more, I don't know, spiritual, psychological sort of place. I think that the greatest threat is this sort of decalibration of the human nervous system, is people just really losing their wits and kind of succumbing to this binary absolutist atmosphere. I don't even want to use the word fascistic because it's too confusing to people. But what we're seeing, false equivalencies aside, what we're seeing on all sides of the spectrum, on the extremes, is people's way of understanding things to be so binary, so extreme, so lacking compassion, lacking any of the normal human filters for
anything. Is that technology, or is that us? Is that who we are?
It's who we can be in particular environments. So we've used the internet and all of these technologies to create a kind of a virtual Skinner box designed to extract the most value or attention from us by any means necessary in the least amount of time. And we have, terrorized ourselves into this state of really fake attention. It's what I wrote about in this book, Present Shock, in 2013. I think it's my most important one because I was really saying, I did say it's going to go into sort of a MAGA right and a brittle left. That they're not that because we've lost our ability to metabolize. We've lost our basic coherence, our resilience. And smart critics have talked about it from all sides, whether it's, the coddling on the one hand or the violence on the other hand. It's a rigidity, this auto-tuned existence in which we live. It kind of cuts us off from all the other forms of, to use a new age word, sort of somatic, lived, experiential intelligence, that people don't trust themselves anymore.
How does one, I could say prevent that, but if it's such a, crisis that we're in because of that, how does one dial that back? How does one push that back from where we are?
Yeah.
I mean, can we get back from that brink? Because I probably would disagree with you on how we got there.
Right.
I don't think I disagree with you on the seriousness of the stuff that I see online every day. I was telling you before we started, I, open Twitter because it's my job, and I'm horrified by next to everything that's served to me. I don't know why they think I'm Joseph Goebbels. I keep on giving them this Nazi stuff. I'm like, I click on these things and I say, look at this psycho. And then I get more of it and more of it. And I'm like, good Lord, there's so much of this. And you see articles about Nick Fuentes, this guy. He's so influential and he's like a neo-Nazi. It's like George Lincoln Rockwell didn't have this kind of stuff. So it scares the hell out of me.
My Twitter feed is all physicists and ethicists.
I thought you went to Blue Sky.
No.
That's all.
I mean, my Twitter feed is
and
not
Blue
as
Sky,
bad.
by the way, is what happens
Yeah.
when you segment yourself. Because I went over there,
Right.
and it's just liberals acting like crazy people, right?
Yeah.
It seems to be both sides.
Yeah, although I don't think they're acting as crazy as some of what I see on Twitter, because the algorithm on Twitter is tuned to the crazy. It's part of what it wants. I mean, I don't think we find the answer there. And I mean, this again is don't try this at home. It may not be right, but I've kind of given up on politics and media and Twitter as the high leverage point for changing culture. I'm doing a tech Sabbath. I took once a week. You take one day off this stuff to recalibrate your nervous system. If you've got a family, try it out. I mean, they'll complain, but if you start when they're 2 or 3, they don't know. It just becomes a ritual. Give yourself what the Israelites gave themselves in the desert. One day away from production and consumption. But I'm finding it in the face-to-face human local interaction. I think the key is to, however much you believe that, the suburbs in America was created to prevent neighborliness and all, meet a few neighbors, reestablish your neighborhood, build some local resilience. We already know it's going to be, 3 months or 3 years till FEMA shows up if there's a problem, right? Now, so what do you want is a resilient neighborhood of people who know how to take care of each other. And it's so much fun. I keep telling this story about instead of going and buying a drill at the Home Depot and doing all the bad stuff for the environment, I went and knocked on the door and borrowed a drill from my neighbor. Mm-hmm. And it changed the fabric of our block, at least, and our relationships and the way we look at the world. It's like these little things that we're afraid to do seem to me to be the easiest ones. And we could dedicate 1% of us to figure out these issues, to figure out if Bibi Netanyahu is telling the truth or not, and do 1% of America, 4 million people can worry about all that stuff and argue on Twitter, and the other 396 million of us can just kind of take care of each other.
Twitter is not real life kind of thing.
Yeah,
I mean, I think
even CNN turns out.
Yeah, I mean, I've told this story far too many times that regular listeners and viewers are probably sick of it. But one of the things that I discovered going to Trump rallies was the number of people that told me that they were meeting their friend so-and-so there. And I said, oh, who's your friend? And they'd say, oh, it's this person. And I said, oh, they'd never met them before. They met them in Trump fora on Facebook, on various websites. And that was their community.
Yeah.
Because they were isolated where they were. This is one I went to in Florida, and I met so many people. Oh, I met this person for the first time, but I feel like I know him. We've been talking online for years.
Yeah.
And that was a weird sense of community. And the MAGA thing was that, we can make fun of these people that they don't have an ideological core, and that Donald Trump can do something very sort of socialistic for the Friedmanites in the Republican Party. They'll be like, what the hell is this? They don't care because it's not about that for them. There's a sense of community in the MAGA universe that I only realized by going to actually
it's back to a clue. The medium is the message, You look at what's happening. Doesn't matter what the words are. Yeah. It doesn't matter what the image is on the screen. It's the fact that the person's sitting there staring at it.
So why do you think, as somebody who's a media watcher for so long, I mean, I know you're sort of pulling yourself away from that because it's poisonous and hopeless in so many ways. But why are we in this conspiratorial time? Or maybe you don't think we are, but I tend to think we're in this time. It is so conspiratorial that HHS is run by a conspiracy theorist. They're all honeycombing the government now.
No, for sure. This is what President Shock was actually about. That the first thing that happens in a digital media environment is you lose your linear narrative. You no longer have stories with beginnings, middles, and ends. Yeah. Whether it's the remote control breaking it up, or hypertext breaking up stories, so you no longer have a continuous narrative. What you have are lots of facts or factoids that are coming at you, and we make sense through story. Mm-hmm. So the internet and Twitter in particular became, on some level, such a beautiful, creative, collective storytelling project. Here's a picture of Jeffrey Epstein. Here's a this, here's a that. And people are playing this big improvisatory yes and game of creating a story. But when you're making a story in a world as kind of scary as ours, you would rather have a story with You'd rather the world be run by a cabal of awful people than have it just happening. Chaos is scarier than evil.
Yeah, and there's something boring about it too. I mean, the Jeffrey Epstein
to people, and it shouldn't
to people,
be.
Yeah.
And that's what they need to get into. I mean, that's part of what psychedelics are so good for, of like realizing that or Robert Anton Wilson's work was so good for, is none of these stories are what's going on. Nobody knows what the fuck is going on here. This is
I mean, I think that
and tolerate that.
There's a part of people like to have the secret knowledge. They like to roll their eyes at you and say, "Oh, you believe that story? Come on now." There's something that's empowering about that. But the Jeffrey Epstein thing has been especially interesting to me because it is so widely believed by so many people who I have respect for. And it's just so much of it isn't true. So the intelligence agents and that, he was running this ring and they were, blackmailing famous people. Well, where's the evidence of this? There is none. But it seems like it could be because he knew these famous people. Yeah. He knew Ehud Barak and he knew Bill Clinton. It's like, well, sure, but you're writing a novel at this point. You're not telling a story that's hewing to any sort of facts.
It's a what if.
Yeah, it's a what if.
Which is why the beauty of it, to me as a creative, it's like, everybody's going what if.
Yeah.
But then realize it says, but that's the whole thing, The original early internet was everybody playing what if in a fun way. What if I joined this IRC chat as a dog, as a woman? I'm a Japanese kid. And it was a play space. You could be anyone you wanted. There was no responsibility. Then once they put banking on that network, all of a sudden, you can't just play what if. This is real. There's business happening here. There's real identity.
Banking, and that's good, Douglas. I mean, so much good has come.
Yeah,
about.
but it has. But
I know you're very negative about this stuff, but I have so many things that I think
wouldn't
are
have put
incredible
it
because
on
of this.
that network. I would have
What
built.
network would you have
I
put
would
it
have
on?
built a secure network. I would have built something else for banking.
But who would that be? The government? That would build
Or
a
the
network?
banking system. Let them build out like a Sabre. You know, the American Airlines built Sabre, which where, I mean, now it's sort of breaking in some ways, but that was a secure system apart from the internet that was the network for airlines.
But what about, I mean, you can have these intranets that are kind of separate bees, but the internet's made everybody's life better and easier and more access to things. And sorry to sound like the utopian libertarian on this, but it's really phenomenal.
I wouldn't get to the point to say it's made everyone's lives better. It's made aspects of our lives better. Mm-hmm. My consumer experience is improved. My banking experience, unless I need customer service, is improved. Yeah. My outgoing communication ability is improved. Yeah, sure. My incoming is vastly...
there are negatives to all of it, right? I mean, I can do the show and I can say something that'll piss people off. And, 20 years ago, they'd have to go to the post office, lick the envelope, put a stamp.
For sure.
It's great and it's terrible. So I said something the other day.
The great is it's very good for expanding our utility value.
Yeah.
But we left behind the human value that we had, that almost the human experiential, spiritual value of knowing we were going online. Mm-hmm. And that, again, it's not just nostalgia for the old days, but when you had to plug a modem into your serial port to dial in and go online, you would go online the way you would put on a record. And it created the sense of, here's my regular life, this is my internet life. Once we took these devices and strapped them on us and had them on 24/7, we live an online existence where we are pinged and interrupted constantly, and it's hard to maintain any kind of coherence in that. So yes, our utility value, my ability to get anything done at any moment, is vastly improved. My ability to tolerate my own and other people's thoughts is decreased. Ability to be present, and I don't know my quality.
I think that the idea that anyone gives a shit what I think or I give a shit what they think, and I'm talking to you people. Don't send me emails. I don't give a shit what you think. But you probably don't give a shit what I think. But that thing, there's a trade-off here. I said the other day, I was in a bookstore, and I was leafing through all these piles of books that hadn't been sorted yet. And I found a couple of old British penguins, the orange spines. And I said, oh my God, these are great. And I realized when I walked out, as I bought them, I walked out of the store, I said, I missed this of going through. I didn't know what I was going to find. I could have just gotten this online. But then I thought later about this, and I realized that feeling that you have, the same thing is true of records, old 7 inches, old vinyl stuff. I still wouldn't trade it for the fact that I can get the stuff that I want all the time, because there were things that I couldn't get my entire life because I could never come across them.
Right.
So, there's a romance to it. I mean, you say that it's not just nostalgia, but it's a lot of nostalgia because, you have this idea and I have this idea because we're of a certain vintage. Right. Young people never have this idea ever.
Right. And we are, as people who were alive before digital technology, we are aware that there is, and I know this sounds radical, but that there is an aspect of human experience that's not happening simultaneously digitally. Yeah. That there is something there, that there's something going on here, and that there's an embodied reality that is not being represented there. No matter how quickly Sam Altman wants to upload his psyche to those things, I don't think it's happening there. And it's harder for kids, but that's why you see Gen Z and Gen Alpha are now going back and buying vinyl and having experience. Go down to the East Village in New York. They are out.
I was in Target the other day and they're selling vinyl. They're selling records in Target.
Right.
Like,
and they're doing it partly as nostalgia. A lot of these kids are buying records who don't even have turntables. So there's that too. But the thing I was more trying to point to was the being aware of going online. Just of knowing that there's a different landscape with and it's an owned landscape. It's not a public place anymore. These are private places,
in it, right? I mean, the public spaces are the privately owned things. Let's say it's Instagram. TikTok, I don't know anything about. I don't. Those are not fields that I till. Ever, I stay away from it. But in Instagram, people are doing things that are very individualistic. They're putting out records, and you can find this like stuff that they're recording in their garage on Instagram. They blow up on Instagram. I mean, I became a journalist because of the internet allowed me to.
Right.
My dad was in a union. I went to a state college. I wasn't one of these assholes that I knew whose parents were also journalists. That's almost everybody that I know. And the internet allowed that, but I used big corporate platforms to do that. So there's a kind of a half and half, right?
I don't know, half and half. It depends on the person and the thing.
Yeah.
But I look at our society and I can say, I do not believe America took advantage of all of the fruits and possibilities the internet had to offer us as we attempted to negotiate a more complex
society. What did we miss,
society.
Though? I mean, I'm somebody who, look, I can't pretend that I'm somebody who is all wine and roses, because one thing would disprove that. And the thing that disproves that is I say to my daughter, put your phone down. Because I know that it's too much. I know that that's information smog. I know that she should be outside. I know she should be communicating with her friends. So I know that it's a part of me. We all get that in a way. But what is that opportunity that we missed that we could have had that could have been different?
I mean, a few. I mean, one was we did shift our values from the kind of a shareware open source sensibility to profit motive. And I know he's done great things, but when Mark Andreessen took Netscape, which was basically a college shareware made by a public, Chicago or University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana, and says, "Oh, let's go public with this," as it was a turning point. And
but you think it was a bad turning point?
Yeah, in that. I guess I understand, as one of the kids who was championing the internet before anyone cared about it, I understand what it's like to get the attention of business. Finally, no one cared. If you told your parents in the late 80s, early 90s that you were getting involved in computers and the internet, they worried for you.
Yeah.
They thought you were like
Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, it was that. That was going to be your future. And so once they're coming, like AOL or someone with money and Sequoia, we're going to pay you to do this. You don't have to just eat pizza in the garage.
Yeah.
Yay. So there was that. And underneath it all, you look at the most resilient and durable internet and technological phenomena, it's still, the servers are all running Linux. Wikipedia is still there. Mm-hmm. Reddit, which is now, even though it's public, Reddit was run with moderators. The things that had human communities as the core facilitators of a thing. It's always, if there's a living community there, it tended to really be positive. And I think we still see, even eBay, had, at time, it goes off, on and on, but eBay had a sense of community there, that there were sellers and who they are. And when you see that underneath it, rather than just consumers or just investors, you end up with better results.
I mean, haven't we just shifted to different things? And I'll give you an example of this. And the reason I like your work is that, when I disagree with it, and I'm going page to page, agreeing, disagreeing, is that, there's so much that I can apply my life to, right? I mean, there's things that I've done in this universe. And an example of this would be the other podcast that I do. I'm sorry, you should listen to that one too, The Fifth Column. That's on Substack. That's a company. That's a company that has, VC people behind it, whatever, and recent money, et cetera. And we have a community in that company. Yeah. And we give them a little bit of money, not an exorbitant amount. We give a little bit of money to the credit card processors. And we have a very tight-knit community. People have gotten married. Yeah. This is true. People, they come to the shows. Yeah. It's the same thing as I said, the Trump thing. They know each other online. Yeah. And that's, within the kind of, landscape of this corporation that has a lot of money.
Which is interesting. And I'm on Substack,
and I think that's
too,
great. I think that's great.
Most of my peers are now migrating from Substack to other platforms because they believe that Substack is now in what would be called the enshittification phase.
Yeah.
They've taken different money, and now it's going to be, perhaps people are worrying that it's going to be harder to export your users and all that. So there are these moments. I mean, Twitter. I loved Twitter. I was friends with Evan Williams. I remember the day I saw his face on the cover of the Wall Street Journal that they went public, and they put like $5.3 billion under his face that he made all that money that day. And I thought, Evan's fucked, because now they've got a return. They were only making $2 billion a year off a 140-character messaging app. And I guess what upset me is that why isn't it enough? Maybe $2 billion a year is all you can really make off a 140-character messaging app. Maybe that app works the best at that level. And the fact that all of these internet platforms were required to continue to grow exponentially pushed them away from their best selves.
You told me before we started I asked you to tell me exactly what you meant by it, and you clarified you're not a Marxist, but you're a
Marxist media theorist. Me and Trump are both
you and
Marxist.
That I agree with.
Yeah.
So I want to abuse that word for a second.
I used the word Marxist, and it was as part of a joke because I got invited by these tech billionaires to talk to them about their friggin' bunkers. And while I'm sitting there, to them, I'm a Marxist, right? Because I believe that we should think, right? Take a pause, which I get. If you think you are slowing the market, you are an enemy of the market, so you paused to think, which is Marxist. And Marxist doesn't mean I'm a communist or a socialist either.
No, to me, you're Milton Friedman. And the reason you're Milton Friedman is what you just said. You said, Substack, it's getting too much, the enshittification, and people are migrating to, that is capitalism, my friend. That is innovation. Somebody is doing something poorly, and a bunch of other companies see a market for it.
It only works when you don't have a monopoly and when you have people who have enough sense to do that, and educated enough.
But even monopolies, remember when the government used everything in its power to go after Microsoft because of Internet Explorer. Even then, I was saying, this is the shittiest browser. Someone will innovate better than this. You don't have to go in and send the might of the government to try to find them to death because you're going to get something else. You got Firefox, and then from Firefox, you got Opera, you got Chrome, all of these things, and then the spin-offs from Chrome. And you can make the argument that maybe Google took such a sizable chunk, but every time you think there's a monopoly in this world, somebody comes in, some upstart comes in and punches you in the face.
The way you're in a technological revolution is the government has finally gotten around to doing a monopoly lawsuit on the last one. Yeah. So it's like the fact that the government finally caught up with Google means that, AI is happening, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And people are using ChatGPT as their search engine.
Well, it's also because conservatives now absolutely love, in the Trump world, antitrust. They love Lena Khan. And this is the kind of scrambling of politics that all of this has kind of created, right? At the end of this, you could have these little categories where you had position papers from the Cato Institute, position papers from CSIS, and we have these nice little categories. The internet allowed everyone to play, right? And when everyone plays, these categories get shaken up like a snow globe.
Right.
And I don't know what a conservative is anymore. I don't know what a liberal is anymore. I know leftists who are like, this woke shit has to stop. And I was like, I thought that was a liberal thing. It's like nothing is in the way.
There's economics, there's women's rights, there's all these different kinds of issues. And these two parties certainly don't, they trade, they trade back and forth. Yeah. Which party is pro-pot? Now, I don't know. Both? Neither?
Both, I think. Yeah.
So it's tricky that way. But, but economically, what I've always been for is it's kind of what, these guys like Chesterton and Belloc and the Pope were talking about.
Say all the Catholics,
Distributism. Distributism, which just means that workers should own the means of production. I like cooperatives. I like when workers are part owners in a business. And there's even stock plans that allow workers to be that. So you're part owners in the thing, and something called subsidiarity, which is that you don't need to grow a business just to grow it.
Well, workers can own stock in the company and have some cooperative element, but the controlling the means of production. Come on now. I mean,
we
we're
do.
going backwards to that.
That's
Give me an
not
example.
backward.
Where
It's forward?
where-
Where's Publix is that, you know?
Publix?
Publix.
Oh, the grocery store in Florida.
It's owned by the workers.
It's owned by the workers in the way. So what way do you mean that? In a sort of Venezuelan Cuban way, or just
In an actual, they are the shareholders of the company rather than people who don't care.
Yeah.
So when the shareholder of the company is the worker in the company, then all of a sudden their wages, their stocks, their things, they're looking at things from both sides now, right? It's very different. And their company is operating where their family lives. So now they care a little bit about the exhaust and
what is
else.
I mean, Publix is an example, which you know,
Yeah, you don't
I
get
have some
all the
problems with that as an example. But
Mondragon or-
I will say that what is the version of politics? Let's take a huge palette and say the past 500 years. You say, well, we are here, but I wish we were there or doing things more like X or Y or Z. Is there some example that you can cite that did it well or does it well?
There was a moment, and no, it wasn't necessarily a better world to live in, but there were innovations from other periods of time that I would love to retrieve. And a lot of them were in the late medieval period, right before central currency, right before the chartered monopoly. We were getting the rise of the middle class. People were trading, they had local currencies.
And they were dying at 40 years old.
There was all these other problems, right? But they were actually, women were taller in late medieval Europe than they were at any time until the 1980s. They were working 2 or 3 days a week. They had better diet than we did. Yeah, there was plague, but when did plague come?
Douglas,
Plague came when they made this stuff illegal.
You're the smartest,
You can.
You cannot say, yeah, but there was plague.
No, you asked me on what did I say? Did I say I want to go back there? No. I said there are innovations that I would love to retrieve. So local currencies, local business, the ability.
Crypto.
What?
Right?
Crypto, yeah, but crypto, the problem with crypto is that everyone looked at the token instead of the blockchain. They looked at the figure instead of the ground. It's a classic.
That's who we are.
Mistake.
We're looking, whether it's a tulip boom or whether it's a shitcoin. I mean, people are looking to flip these things.
Right, exactly. And we have an iPhone, not an us phone, right? Yeah. This is we moved it in a very individual direction because individual consumers buy more than people hanging out.
Okay, so if you read your work, you had a piece on your website on the Substack that I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned the word once today. We hear it all the time. And you said you don't mean this in an ideological way, but the word fascism comes up quite a bit. You had a guest on your show who was talking to the anti-fascist dad. I mean, this was a couple of episodes ago. There's a lot of fascism, right? What do you mean by that? And is it similar to what everyone else is saying right now when they're talking about we're in a fascist moment? This is a semi-fascist government or a fascist government.
Yeah, I mean, I'm something called a media ecologist, which means that I'm looking less at the smartphone than the environment the smartphone creates. Mm-hmm. So when I think about authoritarianism or fascism, I don't see Trump's face on the TV screen. What I see is an environment, is a feeling, is a spidey sense of if you used graphics programs, when you have a graphics program, there's something called a snap to grid, where you have an item and it's either here or here, here or there. When you listen to music now, it's kind of auto-tuned. So everything is on the quantized line. It's either here or there, here or there.
Certain music,
yeah. Right? Yeah. I mean, certain music, commercial music, and it's that both binary and performative bias of this digital landscape. It's funny, television, and I was raised with television, so I'll always have my heart will always be a little TV-like. But television tried to make the whole world one place, for better and for worse. We got global markets, which you would say were good. My kind of people would say were bad, too global. But television was uniting globally. We had the Olympics, we had the moon landing, and it peaked with Ronald Reagan at the Brandenburg Gate saying, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. We're in one world, Ronald Reagan, the TV president. In a digital environment, the biases are not towards that globalism, but towards everything being discrete. You have Donald Trump building a wall, not and having us and them. Am I this? Am I that? Are you Hamas or colonizer. And it's like, wait a minute. When you walk around a college campus and you have to either be pro-Hamas or be a colonizer,
or support genocide.
Yeah, or support genocide. I don't want either one of those. I don't want either one of those. But it's that, and when you feel that is how you know you're in a this kind of absolutist, or what we've been calling a kind of fascistic environment.
But why fascism? I mean, fascism, to use fascism, I mean, there's so many types. You were talking before we started about, anarcho-syndicalism and the sort of list of things that you would get in the Spanish Civil War. Fascism being one of those things in the Spanish Civil War, which was very, very different, the Spanish sort of Catholic authoritarianism than it was in Germany or in Italy. I think the reason, and I'm not accusing you of this, but I'm wondering if you are guilty of this, is that people use fascism because it's redolent of one man and one movement, and that's Germany, that's Hitler, and that's what it's supposed to invoke. Because there's so many times you can just say, it's authoritarian.
Right.
Why bring fascism into it?
Because that's the word people are using. I mean, that's why I say I don't want to call it fascism.
Yeah.
But it's become the convenient a way of explaining it. So we have authoritarianism, totalitarianism, and there is, because if we want to go into the fascist part, then you've really got to go into the big business shifted their allegiance when Kamala said she was going to regulate AI, so all the tech bros go over to the other side and say, "Oh, will you give us, nukes and all these other things?" That's closer to this kind of a conversation about fascism than the authoritarianism or anti-Semitism or ethno-nationalism or all those kind of things.
But I mean, you do agree, I think, and tell me if you don't, that word is being bandied about a bit now in a kind of reckless way.
It's not. I think it's in a non-specific way. There are ways to use fascism to describe aspects of what is going on now in our government, but when people are saying fascist, that's not what they're saying.
But what do you like? Give me an example of what that would be.
Oh, privatization of national parks, or the intentional bankrupting of America in order for the Saudi wealth fund and crypto funds to come in and purchase what were public property. That's. But that's a kind of fascism, right? It's the opposite of state fascism.
I mean, is it not also kind of Stalinist too? I mean,
right?
Why not Stalinism?
Because I mean, if Stalinism, it works, or Maoism for that matter. Although, because Maoism
is a cultural element that that is slightly different,
the Mao's use of, I think Mao's use of radio will be and loudspeakers in his career will be a better indicator of the way AI would be used by our government in the next 4 or 5 years.
We have a question from somebody out there. Ellen, Ellen? Can we get Ellen up, who has a question for Douglas Rushkoff? Ellen, are you there? Hi, Ellen. I can't hear Ellen. Can I hear Ellen now? Still nothing from Ellen.
Not in my little
Not in yours either. One second. There you go, Ellen. Is that you?
Oh, can you hear me now?
There you go.
Yes.
Gotcha. Yes.
Yay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Yes.
I had a question about something you guys were talking earlier about.
Sure.
Just with the internet being the struggles of society, having to sort ourselves out with having the internet now be part of our society. I was wondering if it was similar to when like the telephone was invented, and then radio was invented, and then television was invented, that, I'm not a historian, but I just kind of imagine when the telephone was invented, everyone said, "Oh, look at what it's doing to society," because now no one's going down the street to go and visit with their neighbor for a couple of hours, and it's taking away from whatever. And
television, especially for that. Yeah, that was very true of television. Yeah.
And so I just wonder if the internet is just sort of like the next progression of that, and that we just need to figure it out and figure out how it's going to incorporate itself into society, how we're going to deal with the negatives that come with it. And there's so many negatives compared to TV or
Yeah.
radio or telephone, and then we'll go from there. And then the next thing is going to come along.
Ellen, I think it's a very, very good question. Douglas, these kind of disruptive technologies of the past, how is it in comparison to those things? I mean, were there moral panics in the past that are, or were justified that are kind of similar to this?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Just because they're moral panics doesn't mean they're wrong.
Correct, yeah.
Right? So Socrates was correct that learning to write things down would degrade human memory. It did. Cervantes was right that people would get lost in novels and become romantic and crazy about things and not satisfied with arranged marriages and wanting to have romance and thinking that those stories were true. That movies would lead to an idolatry and a hero worship. That television would lead to a kind of consumerism and stupidity, and that the internet has led to performativity, if you will, with the various protests and things going on where people are trying to sort of walk onto their own screen. I guess the question is, have each one of these media disruptions been appropriately and sufficiently metabolized by the healthy human civilization, and we improve and move on? Which there's certain arguments that you could say we did, and medical things got better and certain things. Or do they have do they create a corresponding brittleness or alienation or confusion? And is there a breaking point? Is there a point at which we just can't get any more media fucked up? I was thinking about this just the other day. I was thinking about language. That what did it look like when a caveman who couldn't speak walked into the next cave and sees a guy going, burp, 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 and then someone goes and brings him water and an egg or something. It's like, what magic was that? It's a completely different thing. And if you don't have those words, if you don't have a word for it, and then who gets to make up the words? And is there a bias in those words? How the words work. And so we moved into a subject-object language system that has, if you want to play lefty, it has colonialism built into it. You're either the subject or the object of the sentence. So you're the used or the used. You're the victim or the perpetrator. It's built into that. So of course we're going to move in that direction. So it has to do. Are we aware of it or not? I would look at the medium that I would blame more than TV or radio or the internet is interest-bearing central currency. I don't like a monopoly. I would like, and that's why I liked crypto for a while. Let's compete with that. What about, money that doesn't earn you money, that you don't have to borrow from the central bank at interest just in order to transact? Who invented that? And we know who invented that.
We've discovered, Douglas, that you're a complete communist right now.
Is that communism?
Yeah. Well, you don't borrow money at interest. There's a lot of good things about that.
There's good things about it, but in order to transact, the rule is you were not allowed to use any other means of exchange because people were getting wealthy and the aristocracy was getting poor. So the aristocracy made a law: no money except our money. You can't do. They used to basically give out poker chips in the morning at the market that people would use for transactions, and they'd settle up at the end of the day. And they got wealthy doing that, and that's why it was made illegal. They sent in the Knights Templar and killed people who used it.
Well, we've determined
it's a medium, though. That's all I'm saying.
We're opposed to the Medicis. This has been an anti-Medici podcaster show. We don't like bookkeeping. We don't like interest. I would say thank you for the question. I would say that, to Douglas's point, which I largely agree with, except for that crazy bit about
central
money.
Currency. All right. So you like
it's
a
fine.
monopoly.
No, it's you're here.
I'm Milton Friedman.
You're here to be crazy
You're
about
the
something once in a
monopolist.
while.
You want one kind of money that has to be borrowed from one bank. It's fine.
Preferably from me.
Yeah,
well, actually, I don't have any money. But I would say to that point, Alan, is that to what Douglas was saying is that these disruptions might actually have lots of negative consequences when people say they are going to. That's not necessarily a bad thing. We weigh the good and the bad. And I think that where we come out is that I'm more positive. I think it's a personal thing too. before we came out, I was talking to you about checking my blood sugar on my phone.
Yeah.
And, capitalism and competition and technology is going to keep me alive much longer than had none of this stuff existed.
As long as RFK lets you keep that thing, yeah.
I think he's good on this one. But he's very, I don't trust him on anything, but on this one. Do we have Erin? Is that Erin? Let's get Erin up there and see if she, Erin is a man. Sorry, Erin. I said that as if you were a lady, but
Don't worry.
whatever your pronoun, we're open to you here, Erin.
I'm used to the Irish, the American, the every version of it. So no, not at all. Thank you so much. It's a great forum. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can you hear me fine?
Okay, great. So I mean, in the last 75, 85 years, 90 years, we've increased our wealth, our access to modern life by at least 50-fold, and if not 100-fold. And when you look at it, the prior 200 years, we did the same thing. And this coincides with the construction of the nation state, and especially in the West, the construction of these what you might call semi-pluralistic societies. I don't think you can remove the technology from this, or rearrange the technology, because it's ultimately self-organizing. And if there is one thing that we've seen, and we see it now, especially in the modern world, the last 50, 60, 80 years, is the democratization of these technologies, right? And I don't mean just internet technologies, but before that with cassette tapes, right? I mean, I'm old enough, and I think you are too, that, I had my, pretty big cassette tape collection, and you'd make your mixtapes with your friends, and, Cure would come out with a new album or whatever, or a new tape, and you'd cut it by the end of the weekend. And so,
Aaron, do you remember the record company's campaign against taping? Taping is killing music.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Taping is killing music. And look that up if you don't know what I'm talking about. You'll find the ads.
And no, I grew
home
up
taping
in,
is killing music. Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in LA in the late 70s, 80s, and I was part of that whole sort of LA music scene as a kid. And, I had a friend who had a JVC, the professional JVC double deck. So you could actually burn tapes at scale. And what they used to do is regulate the blanks. But one of the big blank makers was out in City of Industry. And so we'd go over there and buy 100 tapes, 100 blanks for 50 cents each.
Bootlegging.
So this,
good Lord.
yeah, we're like 13, 14, 15, right? Like that's what you do. But the point is that there was a democratization already, whether it was, putting a library in every town, whether it was getting access to that information, whether it was music, whether it was, TV, that you didn't just have 3 channels, but even before cable, you could have up to 5, 10, 15 different channels, that your antennas could get. So, I mean, so we were already down this path. We were already conditioned for this. And so when we grew up from bulletin boards, if you remember those, the BBSs and the AOLs and the Prodigies and CompuServes, I mean, we were just extending that. And the generation that did that just kept extending it. And now we just have new generations that have built on it. And I guess, look, you're going to have externalities, but let's be honest. Like, if we all remember what the clutching our pearls thing was in the 1990s, it was internet porn. And which almost looks kind of trivial by today's standards. And that internet porn and the overbuilding of all the telco is what gave us the infrastructure that we've been using the last 20 years. And so we can look at these things and they can look terrible at the moment, but over time, I think we look back and we won't say when people have a smartphone or smartwatch on them and they're having a dysregulation event in their health and immediately they get a response. I don't think we'll look back and say, oh, I wish we were in the Gilded Age. And by the way, one quick point about the left view of the medieval era. The first commercial era was actually the Hanseatic League, which was in the year 1000, 1100. I always recommend people go back and investigate. It'll kind of blow you away. It was all across Northern Europe. And that's where our guild
I got to say, Aaron, when I have my producers that say, to get views, you gotta talk to everyone abroad, and they're gonna say, the last episode you're talking about the Hanseatic League. You're making my case very hard. But thank you for that. Before I kick it over to Douglas, one of the things that is interesting about in regulation, you're talking about trying to regulate these blanks, is that regulation is a very difficult thing, right? I mean, because once humans understand that something exists, they will do their best. And this is what authoritarian governments try to do, is prevent people from getting the technology. I mean, look at, buying records in the Soviet Union. They used to print them, make them on X-rays, because it was good to create sort of vinyl versions of X-rays. But a good example is I lived in Sweden for many years, and it was a couple of state-regulated channels. And there was some enterprising guy in Sweden who said, now it's just affordable enough that I'm going to go to England and I'm going to broadcast via satellite into Sweden around the regulations. You can't regulate me. My company and my broadcast is in Sweden, is in England. And that broke up the monopoly because technology existed and the government had to throw up its hands. But that's just my point. But Douglas, what about that? And one other thing I'd add to it is that poverty reduction. I mean, what Aaron's talking about is at time nation states, but global system of trade is created. And if you look at extreme poverty in the past 35 years, what an achievement, what an incredible achievement. I mean, don't you agree that that's a sort of positive thing about technology, about capitalism?
There's great things. I mean, it's interesting, and I understand why if I say I think people need to learn to reconnect with their neighborhoods and each other, that sounds like I'm saying everything is bad.
Yeah.
It's not what I'm saying.
No, I'm not. I don't think you're the Khmer Rouge.
I'm not, right? I'm not.
In Douglas's camp.
I'm a media theorist, and it is true that I think that the embrace of humanity that I saw in those early internet days is something that I think we surrendered to purely to the market, and that the market is great for a lot of things, but it's not great for everything. And because the internet has such a kind of a public collective function, that surrendering it to market forces has turned it into something that is much more manipulative of people, and the companies don't benefit from our coherence and resilience.
To people, I would say one thing. I mean, look, I agree with you. I mean, I disagree. I think there's those universes exist on the internet now within oftentimes things that are built by big corporations. But is it also true, I mean, I think this, I'm not sure you do, that those specializations that you get from big companies because they're hoovering up all your data can sometimes introduce you to really cool things, can help you out too.
Right, which is why then we've got to look at, so let's look at a simple case. Like the AI companies want all of our books and all of our music and all of our stuff as part of its data set.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky enough to have made enough money from what I do and have enough name. I'm personally okay with it.
Yeah.
Take it all, hoover it up, and make what you make. Let it be available as part of the collective knowledge set. And then a lot of people will say right away, and Cory Doctorow, a friend of mine, it's crazy, people, our IP, we've got to use our IP. But that's when it starts to get what you would call Marxist. It's like, well, how could we compensate writers and artists and people without it being in the system of IP? Yeah. What if it's not property? What if it's some other... But again, we have to then start to rethink. And all I'm trying to invite us to do is, how do we begin to rethink things in an open and friendly and coherent way so that we can adapt to different media environments? We adapted to the printing press. We adapted to writing. Writing allowed us to have contracts. It changed ownership. It led to industrial farming. It created so much. Without writing, we wouldn't have had the nation state. So how do we deal with, we haven't really looked at the bigger questions.
Would Cory Doctorow, had he said that in 1997 or 98, been booed in the same way that Lars Ulrich from Metallica was booed by saying, we want our IP and Napster is stealing it from us?
Right. Right. And I understand, honestly, what I think was going on back, I was a taper too, and I would buy the record,
Yeah.
tape it so I wouldn't have to keep playing the record and then wear it out. I'll just play it once a year and make a new tape. Yeah. And I'm spending so much on TDK and Maxell. There were plenty of people making money off me. But I remember when CDs came out, and CDs we know cost them a whole lot less to make than a record. Yeah. Yet they charged us more for them than a record, and encourages everyone's going to replace your whole record. Now you're supposed to replace your record collection with these CDs. Then Napster comes around. I think we all felt like, fuck these guys. I'm going to get, and everybody started collecting every little recording. The only thing that stopped the collecting and copying of all those MP3s was Spotify. Yeah. And you don't want any MP3 at all. I'm just going to stream this stuff.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is the thing. We can never predict what is around the corner. I mean, it's impossible, and nobody would have guessed maybe 25 years ago, 30 years ago, that the record companies would be toothless and the artist would not be touring to support the record. They'd be touring to support themselves.
Right.
And the record supports the tour. That is something nobody predicted. Right. And if someone can go back and find somebody who did, I would love to have them on the show and say, I'll give you.
But it's part of the way that one of the main effects of the digital media environment is because digital bits are free, because there's no cost of reproduction, it's putting the value back on the real world, on these interactions.
And by the way, I'll do one final thing before we go, because this is interesting. I've been publishing for a very short period of time. And one of the funny things about this is because of the digital tools that allow people a voice, this was rolled back. People complaining about, authors complaining about not getting the same royalty on an ebook. The ebook, they get 13% on a paperback, 13% on an ebook. And it's like, no, the ebook doesn't cost anything. How are you giving me such a paltry royalty? And they organized, and the ebooks cost less now than they did a print book that has to actually be printed and has to be shipped somewhere. It has to have,
we get more.
Yeah.
I get more as a writer on an ebook than I do
now
on
you
a book.
There was a while when that was not the case, and they're always trying to squeeze you. But the tools also can prevent some of these assholes in the companies from doing harm to the author, to the artist, and the rest of it. Douglas Rushkoff, this is Program or Be Programmed, a reissue of a book. I'm going to tell you to buy this one. There's a billion of them. The guy produces them at a clip that I don't understand, and it makes me feel bad about myself because I haven't produced a single book. But go to the web. It's douglasrushkoff.com.
Or rushkoff.com.
It's rushkoff.com. Yeah. The Substack, Team Human podcast, everything. We greatly appreciate Douglas coming on today. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Love to have you back. This is the beginning of a conversation that I got to have for probably 7 or 8 hours just today. So join us again. And the rest of you, join us again on Thursday. We do this 2 shows a week, and you can subscribe on YouTube. You see it down there at Moynihan Report. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff. And we will see you on Tuesday.